says they won't hang blood, and they won't even go to the lab and get it.
Right. They don't even take, there's a lot of things besides blood they won't take, you know.
I mean, they won't even give it to a patient. Saying they won't administer it to a patient.
Yeah.
As a nurse, there was a nurse.
Well, you know, y'all know the rock singer Prince that died? Did y'all know him? He was Jehovah's Witness. And part of their responsibility when they're going through their training, they have to go door to door in twos. And he actually went out door to door. Can you imagine having Prince come up to your door and try to convert you to... And he wouldn't take any of the major medicines that could relieve his pain that he had in his legs from the so much movement stuff. His bones were wearing out, his hips.
Officially, he did take some of that medicine.
No.
Propofol is what got him.
Yeah, he was taking medicine, but he was doing it supposedly without them, you know, because they're not supposed to take anything, but he was on the side. But he wouldn't have surgery and stuff, which could have alleviated his problem. And, yeah, what was the name of the drug he was taking?
Propofol.
Yeah, propofol. Now, that's some good stuff. You know, they give you that when you have... I'm serious. I can't get it now. I don't want it. But when I go to have, like when I had this heart procedure done, and I said, "What are y'all using? You know, put me to sleep?" I asked him because I was in the room. He said propofol, and I said, "Good." So he put a mask on my face just to get me in twilight zone. And once they do that, then of course they give you. And you wake up, you don't feel bad. It never has made me feel bad. Yeah. So it's interesting stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we'll cover that too. So.
I don't know what they gave me the last time.
What Scientology is?
Well, and Mormonism and Jehovah's.
Yeah, they're more. They're considered. We're covering the. These are. There's almost 8 billion people in the world now, and these religions we're going through now is where most of the people are. Over half of the world, and they're coming into corporate America because the world has gotten smaller. There's a book called The World is Flat, and in that book he talks about because of technology, and he's got all kinds of examples. Technology has brought the world literally east to west. And, you know, you get support, you're talking to people, you know, overseas or something like that. Come on in. Y'all had to swim in like we did? And, yeah. And anyway, it's an interesting book because, and this book was written years ago, and now they said that there's some places, and McDonald's has tried it. When you go up to order your hamburger, you actually got somebody from India taking your order. And now McDonald's has opened up one in Texas. It's all automated. There's no people in it. So you're basically telling...
Put that automation down here on Beach Island.
Yeah. Do what? No, that Burger King's what needs the automation. Man, you go there, it's like forever to get somebody to wait on you. Then your food, it's like, you know, takes forever. All right, the religion we're looking at tonight is Sikhism. And Sikhism is located in parts, I think, Pakistan and India. And I mentioned last week, as we got through with the other religion, that Haley, who was our governor for a while, Nikki Haley, was raised in the Sikh religion, but she's a Christian now, supposedly. And I think her parents are still Sikhs. And so it's not a well-known religion in America. I mean, I never heard of it until I started teaching these religions. I didn't know anything about it. But of course, overseas, it's a little more. You did now? Okay. Does he wear the turban? Yeah. Yeah. Roger, you and Kenny would look good with those turbans on. Yeah. Let's give Kenny a break. Roger. All right. Background, Nanak is the founder, born in Pakistan in 1469. It is a blend between Islam and Hinduism. Now, when we get to Islam, you'll see some of the similarities of what Islam believes. In fact, the Sikhs actually call their God, and depending on what group you're with, they'll call him Allah. And But what they've done, this is when I told you a few lessons ago that one of the things that happens in religions is you get the liberals and conservatives, the people who are strong into Sikhism and those who are kind of moderate, or they might be Islamic, but they don't like everything in Islam. They syncretize everything and get a mixture of both. Things that they like, things that they don't like, put it together. Now, if you told one of them that that's what they did, looking at their beliefs, they would get very angry with you. They believe their religion is first time, But when you look at what they believe and you compare it to Islam, you see a lot of similarities. Doesn't mean it's just like Islam, but it's a lot of similarities. I haven't met any Sikhs. Mark says he knows one. Does he act in a way that you would know that he's a Sikh?
Aloof as they can be.
Really?
Yeah, they just
Does he talk much? Or
talk years on.
Oh, really?
But they're kind of snooty, uppity, around everybody else.
Really?
The ones that I've met.
The ones you've met. Okay.
I wouldn't say, I couldn't go as far as say it's all of them that way.
Yeah. Okay.
They're always well dressed.
Yeah, they are.
Very well dressed.
He grew up in a Hindu family, married, had 2 children. He experienced what he called the true name. There is neither Muslim or Hindu in their groups, but they basically say they're the true religion, just like a lot of the other religions. He sought disciples. The word Sikh means disciple. So y'all my Christian Sikhs. Jesus said, if you want to be my Sikh, follow me. No, we won't go there with that. He had a close friend named Mardana who was a Muslim. Well, there you go. They learned from each other and created their own religion. Their worldview, they claim to be a totally new religion. Reincarnation and karma are accepted. And remember, reincarnation is you're trying to get from this reality of living here and go through the acts of being a good Sikh or whatever good deeds you should do in order to gain enough karma, good karma, to cause you to be able to be pulled out of this reality into nothingness. Okay? He resisted rituals. Like we have rituals in Christianity, the Lord's Supper, baptism, worship, singing. He resisted that. He opposed polytheism. What is polytheism? We mentioned that one time before. Multiple gods, just like Egypt had multiple gods. That's why it was important for God on Mount Sinai to declare to the Israelites, there's only one God. And you no longer have to be showing allegiance to all these gods to try to live. There's just one God. He believed in one God. God is beyond personhood, but has personable qualities. So he's supernatural, but yet he has more, can be understood from, the personality and so forth of people. God is a guru. Nanak is his spokesman. If you were Islam, when we get there, it says in the scriptures that Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. You see the similarity? God is a guru, which is one who's an enlightened teacher. Nanak is his spokesman, so he's the prophet of this God they serve. So they believe that God dwells within each individual. God can be contacted within the heart through meditation and things like that. Religion has a strong social responsibility, so they believed you should show your faith in your religion, in this particular religion, and how you treat your neighbor. He criticized Islam and Hindu for not helping the poor. Now you got to remember, in the Hindu faith, if you were in the lower class, the untouchables, then you couldn't move to the next level. Remember, there was like 5 different castes. Well, if you were born into the poor group, you could never move up. You had to stay there. And if you went over there today into India, and I've talked with people who've been there, pastors and some people from my former pastorate, they said the poverty is unbelievable. But it's poverty that they have to accept because they can't move out of that caste. So if you're born into a poor family, that's it. That's the way it's going to be. Hopefully in the next life, you'll be able to go through the cycle of reincarnation and get out of that. He formed Sangats, which are worship God and help people. The Sanghats are congregations of the Sikhs, like we have church. Well, he formed Sanghats, which would be basically a group of Sikhs, and their major focus would be the worship of God and helping people in difficult times. Development, there are several stages. First, it was just a movement. So with a movement, it took a while to build disciples, like it would in any starting a new church work or something. He became a militant, then it became a militant movement to protect itself. It's interesting because the Sikhs will fight. They will go into the military and they will fight. Whereas the Hindus, are resistant to do that. And of course, Islam will fight. But they are fighters, and primarily because they were being persecuted by the Hindus and by the Islamic, because the Islamic people don't like them. It became a legitimately recognized religion as new followers became disciples, as it grew. Huh? Regiments, exactly. They have the 5 Ks of the, like pasta here, or salsa, 5 Ks of the castle, which is a major military order. Kesh, which is uncut hair and a beard like a lion. So that's why they wear the turban, to keep their hair. They're not supposed to cut their hair, nor their beards. They're supposed. Does this guy have a big beard?
The ones that I've met were no more than what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
I don't recall any of them that,
Are you confessing tonight that you're part Sikh and just you're coming out of the closet, or?
Mine's gray.
Great. They were young Sikhs. Okay. The long hair in that part of the world, if you remember, in the Old Testament, the Nazarite vow, they couldn't cut their hair, and that was supposed to be a symbol of dedication to God. That is a cultural thing that you see in a lot of Eastern religions, and I think it was in the Hindu faith we saw some. I think I showed some of y'all when we were back there some of the pictures of the guys with the beards who were teachers and so forth in some of those religions. That group is called Kesh. The Kanga, the hair comb to hold the hair in place. So they have a special comb they have to use to comb their hair, to keep it so they can put it up in the turban and to comb through their beards. The other part is K-A-C-H, I guess that's what, Koch. Special underwear, alertness and ready to fight. Now, I know we laugh, but to them, that is very important. Mormons have special underwear that once they get married, they have to wear their sacred underwear as a couple. And the only time they can take it off is when they bathe. And it's kind of like a onesie in so many words. It's got, you have to slide it on. It's a certain way where, I know when I was teaching this in my other church, I had comedians, that said they were going to start it among Baptists. We all had that special underwear. And of course we never did, and I wouldn't permit it, but special underwear, alertness and ready to fight. So with that underwear on, if you got up in the middle of the night, just throw your clothes on and go fight. You wouldn't have to hunt for your underwear or whatever. Was it called commando when you don't wear? But anyway, kirpan, which is sword for defense, and each of them would have a personal sword that they would use in fighting. And kara was a bracelet of steel strength. I would, if you get a chance to have lunch with that guy, Mark, just kind of ask him some questions. Look at his wrist, if he's wearing one, and just see. If I run across people like that, I pick their brains if they will talk. I talked with the guy who was a Buddhist, and after class, he did his lecture in my class, and then when I was teaching in the college, and so when it was over, I called him aside. I said, "Why'd you switch from Baptist to Buddhism? What caused you to make such a drastic change?" And he was very nervous about it. He thought I was going to hound him and tell him he's going to hell and everything else, and that was not my agenda. I just was interested in learning from somebody who went from being a Southern Baptist kid, get in the military, be stationed in Japan, or his father was stationed there, and then finally have him switch over to Buddhism. And, he just said that everybody around him was Buddhist, and he just got interested in it. And it seemed like it done him a lot of good as far as meditating. If I got around somebody who was a Sikh, I'd pick their brain till I found if they would talk, because I was just curious. I guess I'm an inquisitive guy. Not that I want to become a Sikh.
First thing you'd ask him what kind of underwear he's got on.
No. No,
Make sure he ain't there to fight.
I want to do that. Their scriptures, this is a very simple religion. It's not very complex. Their primary book is called Adi Granth. It's divided into 3 parts. The Japji, they have the 39 rags, which in parentheses means tunes, so they have music. Then a collection of poems and hymns, which is part of their sacred book. So they do have writings that they follow. And that's it. I don't have much more to tell you. It was a very short chapter.
The surgeons that I work with that were Sikhs, like even their turbans, yes, they never took them off even when they went to the OR, even the OR and their bracelets, you couldn't see them a lot of times would be under their shirts.
Yeah. My oncologist I have now is very, very intelligent. She's young. I'd say probably late 30s, maybe early 40s. It's hard to tell. To me, it's hard to guess their age because they all look like somebody told me and Gail the other day we were somewhere and we told them how old we were. She said, "Oh, y'all not that old." I said, "We're not. We're just fooling you." We're really. Gail's a teenager. I robbed a grave, but no. Talking with her, I know she has a faith, but she's reluctant to talk. Now, my doctors I had in Charleston that were oncologists, they were all Jews. My pulmonologist was a Jew. They all knew each other. And I told him one time after I'd been going to all of them for one time, I said, one of the greatest physicians ever to walk the earth, the greatest physician was a Jew. So I'm in good company, ain't I? And they knew what I was talking about because they knew I was a Southern Baptist preacher. And they just didn't, I was trying to find ways to talk to them about the Lord, but they knew what I was up to. And they just never. But when I finally found out this lady's got me on the pathway to a complete cure with this disease I've been fighting for 15 years. And I told her the other day, she says, well, when she put her hand on my hand, she said, well, I'm telling you, when the fall gets here, we're going to take you off that medicine, and there's a test we run. And she says, I'm telling you, you're not going to find any cancer in your body. This drug is so good. And it's no side effects. I got one more infusion to take. And so I'm waiting. And when the time comes, I'll say, I don't want to be too personal. Maybe you can't share with me, but I was just curious. What do you believe? And it's going to crack me up. She said, I'm a Southern Baptist. I said, well, I had you pegged wrong. I would like to know what beliefs she has, because several of my doctors are, I call them Indian, Pakistani. They're not from here. I'll put you that way. So I don't know. I'm not. Well, I get where, sometimes I have to listen real good, but they're very, very good doctors. I've seen enough doctors to know when I got a good one and when I don't have a good one, and I ain't beside the chain. I'm not one of those people that has to have the same doctor all the time. If the younger they are, the better they are to me. They're on the cutting edge. So anyway, I am trying to, when I'm going through this journey of cancer, because I talk to all my doctors about the Lord, and when they talk about me being healed and spared from stage 4 cancer, I share that. I said, well, God's using you to bring about this healing, but it's from the Lord. I'll get a chance, I know, because I don't believe, I'm in contact with these people just to be in contact with them. And, but at the same time, I'm just curious. I'd like to know what she believes, Now, these next few religions are even further east, China, and then we'll look at Japan. How many of you heard of Taoism? It's also called Taoism. It has 2 names, okay? And let's go through these, and then Confucianism is a very large religion in China. Most of the people in China practice Confucianism. And we'll go through that and look at it. First thing is early Chinese beliefs. They believed there were spirits of good and bad in the universe. Taiyan is their place they refer to as their heaven. It's a cosmic force that controls events on Earth. So they believe in a force that's causing good and also can be the cause of bad. It's called Tian, or in our translation, heaven. They believe in the veneration of ancestors, which means worship or honor of ancestors. Some of the other religions we've already studied, can you think of some of the other ones where ancestors played a major role? We first got started, we talked about who? Huh? Yep, we talked about native Indians, you know, the totem pole. A lot of the indigenous groups in Africa have ancestor worship. They also recognize that their ancestor spirits are still with them, and their chieftains are given credit. And for the American natives, they basically, you know, would have these what we call totem poles to recognize each chieftain, and that their spirit empowered the tribe. They see patterns in nature. They practice the belief of yang and yin, which universe expresses itself in opposite forces. And I drew this before, and some of y'all may have seen it. Maybe you've seen people wearing it like this. And on this side, this would be a white color. Can't do it upside down. White over here. Over here, this would be dark in color. So we'll do it like that. And they come together, and you see the necklaces people have on. You pull them apart. This dividing line is like this for a reason, because they believe the forces of good, which they give the color white to that, and then the darkness or black to this. They look at it as this being a symbol of good and bad, or evil, if you want to use the word evil, in the universe. And this line being like this means it moves back and forth, as the forces of good and evil operate in this world. So let's say over there in that country, they have a major catastrophe. Well, the forces of evil are coming against them, but they believe eventually good will overwhelm that. Now, when you saw the movie Star Wars, and if you paid a close attention to it, and I mentioned this briefly, Star Wars, when it first came out, was an entertaining movie, and it kind of caught people by surprise because of the graphics and, you know, the fighting each other. But I read one of the books. I didn't read the rest of them. And then I read some other books about the movie, and said that the people behind the movie, behind the books, were trying to introduce the philosophy of the Eastern religions that see the forces of good and evil. And so what would they say? May the force be with you. Remember when they said that? Well, they were referring to this line right here as being the force, and it could operate good or bad. And so some of the characters were dressed up in dark outfits, and some were dressed in white. Remember, Luke Skywalker was a Jedi, and he had the kind of lighter clothing, and the Darth Vader, which we found out in the later movies was his dad, because see, they're both the same. It's just one chose one side and one chose the other. So their interpretation of the universe is you got these forces, and so they symbolize it with this, and they basically have other ways of recognizing, you know, the yin and the yang, and they go against each other. That's a terrible way to have to believe, because now you're basically, your life is based on fate, you know. Whereas our life is based on faith. We have faith in God. We put our trust in God that He's going to give us direction. In fact, God's word says He orders the steps of the righteous. So He guides our life. We trust Him and we serve Him as best we can. Where over here, you know, it's just fate. Now, I put a challenge to you all. It's been a couple of months when we started this. Next time you go to a movie, look for the religion being taught in that movie, because every movie, I haven't seen one movie yet that doesn't have a religious overtone in it. Either our God or some other religion. That's just a part of, because we're all religious people. And they put that in there. And even the science fiction movies have that. Now, one movie, and I think you can rent, it's called Transcendence. Have y'all seen that movie? It's about where a guy is dying from cancer, and he has the technology to put himself, you know, because they say in the future you're going to be able to put yourself into the computer codes and get into the computer. Well, he had advanced the technology through nanoscience. He actually gets in the computer and he dies. And his wife comes when they turn the computer on because she thinks it's all gone, and he starts talking to her. And because he's a computer now, he starts building his whole universe because he can make these machines work for him. And he takes over everything. And then somewhere in there, he says, I'm God. Because he can control people's lives. He can tear stuff up. It's an interesting movie. It's a science fiction movie. But transcendence is another name for God. All powerful, all ruling, can do all things. And he transcended from this life into this computer, and he became God. And the guy who was his best friend is trying to stop him. And it's pretty interesting. And of course, it's science fiction. But the idea that there's a power out there that has the power, and that movie was a way to do that. So it's another name for God. It's just an interesting concept. But this is what the symbol looks like. Let's go to the next slide. Taoism, Confucianism. And here's the symbols. Yang is light. Look at this, ladies. Yang is male, warm, right, front. The yin is dark, female, cold, left, and back. Those are the words that symbolize the two forces. So what does this religion say about females? I'm laughing too with you. What does it say about females? Huh? What do you mean?
I mean, I don't think women are wrong.
But that's most of we're talking about 2 billion, maybe 2.5 billion people. So let me ask you something. If you go to China, how are women treated in China? How are women treated in some of the, like in the Hindus, which they don't have the yin and yang? Huh? I think they get treated the way Roger treats Nellie. You know, I got him, boom. I got him then, didn't I, Kenny? I got him, boom. No. Are you Hindu or are you Confucius? Huh? Nellie would probably be saying, amen, brother. All right, now let's talk about Christians for a moment and Jews. What is the world, and when we get to their religion, how do we view women? The Jewish faith and Christianity, how do we view women in this world? Come on, men.
Christians as an equal.
Well, ladies, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Have you always been treated equal by male counterparts?
No.
Do you feel, it's starting to ride here, Mark. Are you ready, Mark? Go put your seat at. Well, wait a minute. I'm trusting you've got your turban on so we can you can defend me. And now I'm getting you to think. You brought your, well, I don't know. Most of us live our lives and we never think about these things, okay? But I'm getting you to think about it. Paul's letter says, husbands, love your wives as how Christ loved the church. What does he say about women? What should they do? Love your husbands. What else? Submit. All right, when you hear the word submit, what does that have pictures in your head? What does submissiveness mean?
Lay down.
It's yes, sir, no, sir. The original word in the Greek language comes from the military. It means to be under one's direction as if that person were a military person that required allegiance and obedience. Okay, that's the original word. That's how it's used. In that particular passage, Sarah, who was Abraham's wife, has that picture. But he also said that husbands should love their wives, what, as they love themselves. Whoa. So what does that mean? How do we love ourselves, guys? Do we love ourselves? What do we do? Get the chicken ready. I'm ready to eat. What's wrong with you? How come this house is dirty? What you been doing all day?
Not in my house.
Not in your house?
We've always considered, I think civilization's considered females as the weaker sex.
And why? Paul uses that phrase in Peter. Peter uses those words. He said the weaker,
Well, as far
part.
as strength is concerned, that is true. And we maybe use that as overall.
Okay. Now, what year was it? Let's see if you know your history. What year was it when women got the right to vote? 1920.
28?
Yeah. No, 20. Before then, women could not vote. Okay?
on land.
That's right. In a lot of places, they could not even own land. Gail and I stayed at a bed and breakfast up in Columbia, and it was Colonel Kershaw or something from, anyway, the war between the states. But anyway, his wife was a very outspoken female, and she would, when they'd go to the family thing, she was from another part of the country. And his father and then, when they'd go there, they'd tell you need to do something with your wife, keep her mouth, So when he got killed, she didn't inherit the plant. They kicked her off. The place that they had was his. She couldn't live there anymore. And so she wrote a bunch of stuff against him, but she lost everything when he died. She could not. She was into politics. She was into, things that women should not be talking about. So even in this country, ladies, we see this division between male and female, and in the foreign countries under these other religions, there's no equality. The Bible says there's neither male nor female in God's eyesight. There's neither Greek or Jew. There's no ethnic groups that we're all one and the same. The human race is all equal before God, regardless of where you are, where you come from, your nationality, whatever. We're all equal. And this idea that we're divided and separating stuff is man's attempt to create tension because of our differences. But when it comes to females, the women's right movement, in my opinion, went too far, because now men don't even know what they are. They've basically made men more effeminate as far as how they teach kids, and now they have changed the genders, but you can't change what a male or a female are. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up, in contrast to these religions, we have Judaism and we have Christianity. Okay. Now, I want you to turn to Genesis and look in Genesis 3. And I've covered this one time before. I just want to refresh your memories. Genesis 3. And read to me the part in Genesis 3 where the curses come about because of Adam and Eve's sin. Okay? It's a few verses down. God comes in. He starts looking for Adam. We talked about in our lesson in Sunday school this morning. I said, he didn't ask for Eve after it happened. He asked for Adam. Because Adam... Huh? Yeah, when he starts with the serpent, go right down. What happened to the serpent when he tempted Adam and Eve?
You have done this, you have cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
All right, stop right there. That's the first hint of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. That's the first verse in the Old Testament where you get a clue of what God's going to do to correct this curse. He said that the seed of Satan would come against the seed of mankind, and that being Jesus Christ, born as a human but fully God. His heel was bruised. The crucifixion didn't kill him because he was raised from the dead, but it was a violent act. But he said his head would be crushed, so Satan loses his power. How do you kill a snake? Cut off his tail? Notice, I forget how far it is up a snake you can cut, and he'll just reproduce, I always go for the head. If I'm going to kill a snake, I'm going for the head. I ain't taking no chances. Now, if it's a big snake, I'm leaving. But if I can get, But the point being, that's the first mention of the gospel. So what happened to the serpent? He's crawling on the earth, and one day he's going to be defeated because of what he did. So Satan used a snake. So if this is true, and I believe it to be true because it's in God's word, those snakes were upright. Now, I'm scared enough of one crawling around, but you get me one up walking around. Huh? Right. A king cobra can get to the length of 18 feet. And you've seen them do the music and get them to come up, but they can rise up 1/3 of their body and hold their balance. And that's a fearful thing to see a 6-foot cobra, The rest of its body's down here. So that's almost an indication at one time snakes could do that. So that's the curse, to remind us of what happened. What happened to the next one? What was the next one, Mark? Read it.
To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
And what does it say about what the husband would do?
And to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herbs of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. Out of it you were taken, but dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
Okay. Now we know the biggest thing is death. And when death comes illness, it leads to death and so forth, and sorrow and heartache, all those things that go with death. Now, if you go back to the female, her sorrow will be increased, which means there'll be death sometimes in childbearing. And I know in my last church, when you go out in the cemetery, you see a lot of little tombstones back before, and even today, that's one of the most dangerous times for a female in her life is to have a child, particularly if she doesn't have medical care, because it's just a high risk, and prenatal care is almost important. And there have been people who have lost children. The pain, ladies, was it painful to have a baby? I don't think it's painful as a kidney stone. Finley laughed.
We never had a baby.
Yeah, that whole idea that a man can have a baby is a lie, because biologically it's not possible. For a female to call herself a male and then have a baby, she's still a female biologically. That's the only way that can happen. It's the way God designed it. So they're feeding us lies, okay? But pain is a reality. What about this one? We don't talk about this one. I never heard it preached on coming up. And when I was taking my Hebrew classes in seminary, the professor went through this and he said, let's talk about this word desire. He said, in the English language, what does this word usually imply? Today. It's called connotation. You know, words have different meanings, and how you use them in a sentence and stuff, it has a different meaning. So when we hear the word, it says desire for a husband. What would you think that would mean? Do what?
Wants one.
Yeah, wants a husband? I don't know.
It's a sexual thing.
Well, that's what you think, and that's what I used to think. But when I looked at the original Hebrew word, it means you want something that the other person has. And it's not biological. You want his role as the leader in the home. In other words, you want to usurp, is a big fancy word. You want to usurp his role, and he says, and your husband would do what? Rule over you. The word rule can mean oppress, mean find ways to keep you in your place. And so there's going to be tensions between males and females because of what happened in the garden. Now let's flash back to the 22nd, where we are, 22nd of the 21st century. These religions reflect this curse. Because all around the world, when women try to move up, they're always put down. In some cultures, it's pretty severe. And every so often, you don't hear about it, but in China, it's real bad. In some of the other countries, in the Arabic countries, it's real bad. People says we need Sharia law. No, we don't. If we get Sharia law into certain areas, in some parts of the country, they're trying to declare certain areas where Islamic people have moved in, they want to operate under Sharia law. Well, if they do, a husband can beat his wife and the police can't do anything about it.
Honor killings.
That's right. They can mistreat their wives and you can't do anything about it. And if he catches her in adultery, he can even have her put to death for committing adultery. It's a double standard for men versus females. It's bad when you study the cultures. And remember, the word cult means religion, so culture is people with basic beliefs that believe one way. And so the Islamic culture has a negative view of women. They have to cover up. You go out in public, some of you in the military maybe went over there as a female, they tell you there's certain places you can go, certain places you can't. If you go out, you got to cover up. Business people talk about it all the time. They don't want you to show any of your flesh. Have you seen some of the movies? Now, this being said, in Judaism, go back and read the Bible, they don't treat women very well. Think about it. Some of them had multiple wives. God wasn't pleased with that. He believed in monogamy, one wife, But when man chose to get multiple wives, it created problems. And in the case of Abraham, did it create a problem? Sure did. And we got a problem, we're dealing with it now. To this day. nations that are both basically, and he blessed Ishmael, the child, and said, you would also become a great nation, but they would become enemies of God's other people that was birthed through Isaac, okay? Now, I bring all this out because we don't think about this, but this is a major issue in our nations today when it comes to women's rights, and this is what's been governing this nation in the last 60 years or longer. Women's rights. You hear it all the time, feminism, stuff like that. And the spin-offs from it is that now they want to bring, that there's neither male nor female. They want to bring the two together and say there's different genders, and if you go to some of these doctors and you have to fill out the form, they want to know what gender you are. Well, I'm a male. But they got me 8 other choices, and I'm going, that's ridiculous. I just scratch through and say, capital M, and my wife's a female, And they're doing a lot of this. One of their agendas, and they don't talk about it, but I know what they're doing, they're basically trying to depopulate the earth, and this is another way to do it, is to create confusion between males and females, because God gave us the gift to be able to reproduce. And he said, multiply and fill the earth. He didn't say, down the road, you need to kill some of them and kill babies and kill the old people. He didn't say nothing like that to control population. He said, multiply and fill the earth. Well, we got almost 8 billion people in the world. Now, you drive down through South Georgia, there's a lot of land, there ain't nobody living on it. You drive through places in South Carolina, right down there in Groton Plantation, and we go down there going to Hilton Head. There's a couple of places, there's no power lines for miles. There's a lot of land down there, okay? Now, you go to India, and it's smaller than Texas, and it's got 1.2 billion people living in it. It's densely populated, but when you're living under a caste system, they won't let you out of the country. You got to hang out there, and they're having people all the time, There's ways to control population without killing people, but there's people with an agenda to depopulate the earth, and one of their plans is to create confusion between the genders so they won't repopulate. They'll basically quit having children and basically reduce the number of people being born. It's part of the agenda. Now, having said that, desire for a husband and a role, this comes out in many different ways. Have you ever heard women say to their husbands or to their significant others, they want to know what you're thinking? And most of the time we're not thinking about nothing. They want to know what you're doing, why you're doing that. And we're going, why you even bother to ask me? Okay? Then we have situations where, in marriage relationships where, and this happens to everybody, as you get older, the men actually become the children of our wives. What we wear, where we go, how we comb our hair. Why are we laughing? You need to pick the dust off your shirt. You need to. Why does that even happen? Do you find yourself saying to your wife, you wouldn't dare say it, why are you wearing that?
The magic words are yes, darling.
See there, he's learned it. All right, there's tension between males and females. We're different. God made us different. And there's all kinds of books been written. Psychologists have studied it, some are from Venus being female, from Mars, left brain, right brain, all this stuff. And scientifically, they can show these things. But I can observe physically and know that there are differences. But that was God's plan. Now, sin messed it up. Because before the fall, Adam and Eve had no problems, her being the wife of her husband and him being the husband. And it says he went out and tilled the garden, and, she had her role. And before they had children, her name is Eve, which means mother. She was to be the mother of, mankind. And of course, some people want to put the sexual thing into it and say, well, the sin they committed was they had sexual relations and God didn't want them to do that. We'll go back to the first 2 chapters, and when God made everything and he said what they should do, he said, multiply and fill the earth. And he gave them the ability to do that, and he said it was good. But the world twists what God says is good and distorts it. Sin broke the relationship between men and women. Christianity is the only religion that makes a major attempt to bring equality back. The trouble with is, if not everybody's a Christian, there are going to be people twisting the agendas, and it's hard to see that. We in the church should make sure in the church that we teach the truth, we recognize the problem, but we also find ways to heal the problem. And then when we get to heaven, people want to know, am I going to be married in heaven? And another fellow says, I hope not, because that wouldn't be heaven, you know. Finley keeps laughing back there. Finley, is Roger poking you or what? He got his hopes up. Jesus was confronted with this, and I think it's Matthew 19 about, you know, when a man dies, and let's say here on earth he had, you know, the 7 wives, or the wives had 7 husbands, which would be their husband in heaven? And he said, neither one. They're going to be like the angels. There will not be marriage in heaven. And I know that upsets some of you, and you think, well, I had a good marriage, and I want to see my loved one. You're going to see your loved one. But you got to realize, eye has not seen, nor ear has heard what God's prepared for those that love him. And what that means is the relationship you have now will be through Jesus Christ. And the people that you were related through here was an earthly relationship. There it's going to be enhanced. And though you don't live as families, you're still going to be as one family and united. And the uniqueness of it is you'll be known as you're known here, but not with all the sinful things that come here. And that's as simply as we can explain it. Now, getting back to this and getting back to these religions, you can see how this would put people in oppression. Because if you're born a female, then they already got adjectives to describe you: cold, left, back. So, you know, light, male, warm, right, front. So they've already got adjectives, and those are just a few. There's some more that go with it. And so you're already put into a category, and the force is what separates you. So the force has made that decision, and then the tension between the two forces goes back and forth. And then because of what we learn in Genesis and other cultures, men will oppress women. They do some terrible things to women because this curse is here. They don't have the truth, and they don't have the gospel. So far as they're doing what they feel is right. And that's the reason why you see the rights movements talking about feminine rights and so forth. And you still see it today in business. It's changed some, but you remember the glass floor, glass ceiling? Women can be put in a position of a same equal of somebody else in business, but not get paid the same pay or get treated differently. Now, some of that's changed in some corporations, but overall, you still hear it. And if you're a male and you're hanging around a bunch of males, they still talk about women the way they always have. And some of them come across with negative stuff that's demeaning, that's, they think it's macho to demean people, and, it's particularly the women folks, and just be mean to them, I guess. And what I'm saying is, and men know exactly what I'm talking about, or to talk about them as sexual objects rather than as human beings. So the whole purpose here is just to, be part of a relationship with a man. And God had greater intentions in that. When he said help meet, that's the King James. Remember that? The Hebrew word comes from like a mathematical term, and like geometry. It means a circle, and it means like this. Notice it ain't wavy. You have the male and have the female. This word help meet means, it's a King James word. But in the Hebrew, it means to bring two halves together to make a whole. So that's when it says one flesh. So the male has certain things about his life, his personality, his ability. He's stronger, he's physically to protect, provide. But men are geared to work. Not every man is, but most men have an urge to provide and to work. And when you take that away from him, it demoralizes him. Unless he's already on welfare or something, I don't know. Females, on the other hand, are more kind, passionate. Of course, they do a better job with kids than we do. Do what? Touchy-feely. They're different, okay? But what we don't have, they provide, and what they don't have, we provide, and that's where the two halves come together and make the one flesh. It means to be brought together and to be a helpmeet. So those are basic concepts from our Judeo-Christian ethics. The Jews don't go far enough. They still mistreat women. There's still some things among the Jews that when you study their culture and what they do, even to today, is demeaning toward the woman. And a lot of them blame the women for the sin in the garden, and that's a lie. Adam was sitting right there with her. His role was to be the head of the house. And what he should have done, and he didn't do, when I get to heaven, I'll have a long talk with him. What he should have done was be the head of the home, reached over and took her arm and said, honey, I love you to death. But you're having a weak moment right now. And I'm here too because I'm hungry. But I got news for you. You know what God says we shouldn't do. And if he gently pulled her hand back and then stomped the head of the snake, then the rest of the story would have been changed. But he was just as guilty because he went along with her. And he went with his flesh rather than when, because he was sitting right there with her. It's not like she was tempted and he comes up and then she tempts him. They were right there. He heard the whole conversation, and being his role was to make sure nothing like this could ever happen. But he failed. So we're males and females are both part of it. But in a lot of these cultures, the female gets the blame. And in these foreign religions, it comes out very clear. And most of the world thinks this way. When you have 8 billion people and Islamic is 2 billion, Confucianism is probably at least 2 billion or close to it. Taoism, others are probably only maybe a billion. Hinduism, 1 billion. You know, if you're a Hindu wife, you answer to your husband. You answer to your father, and then you get married, you answer to your husband. And if he dies, you have to go back and answer to your brother if you have one. You're always under the jurisdiction of a male. And it's very, very oppressive of what you can do and what you can't do. Now, keep in mind, there's some liberated people that get away from that, but overall, that's the situation. All right, we're almost through for tonight. We'll pick up next week. Divination, looking into the future, is a major part of these two religions. Now, Lao Tzu, Lao Zi, as guys pronounce it, means old master or old child. Facts about him are mythical. So he's the founder. That's his name. He was born old, so they say. That would be something, wouldn't it? Did y'all ever see the movie where that guy was born old? He was an old man, then he went backwards and the lady fell in love with him and had years, then in the end he turned into a baby. Maybe that's the way this is. I don't know. He supposedly wrote 5,000 teachings. He was a librarian and a scholar. He was supposed to be treated. He was treated as a deity, which means a god or lord, and they called him Lao. So that's another name, for him. The Dao De Jing, which means Tao Te Ching, one of the world's greatest books, Dao's Central Scriptures, 350 BCE, which means about 350 years before Christ. It may be a collection of teachings. Its purpose was political, religious, harmony with the universe. So people who like this climate change stuff and want to preserve the earth, they have no problem with some of these religions. They like this stuff because it fits in to their worldview of saving the planet. And so they have practiced many of these teachings about that. One more slide and we'll quit. This Dao De Jing, Dao is beyond any description. Dao is not God. Dao is nameless. Dao makes humans but doesn't care. Isn't that interesting? Taoists observe opposite to what is actually happening. The boundary between reality and dreams is not easily discerned. So their worldview is when you dream, that could be your reality. If you had a dream, you woke up and you said, man, I'm glad that didn't happen, or whatever. Well, they see that when you're dreaming and then what you're living now, that there's no fine line between the two. That is a part of your reality. That's a scary thought, especially if you eat a piece of chocolate before you go to bed. You can have some strange dreams, You might be in a Western, watching Westerns on TV like I did one night and ate something like that. In the middle of the night, I was having a gunfight, but my gun was real small and they had Colt 45s. And I was taking everybody on and I wasn't getting anywhere. I woke up in a sweat and I said, I lost that. I was no gunslinger for sure. So, but anyway, we'll pick up next week with this and get into more detail. All right. Is this stuff kind of interesting and makes you wonder, don't it? I tell you, the more I study, every time I teach it, I go back and I just simply say, Lord, thank you for being born in America. Thank you for being born in a Christian family. Yeah, you go home and change your underwear.
We'll go home and change my underwear.
Yeah. Well, we hadn't started handing out underwear yet. Yeah, your diaper. Yeah, we get older, we all start wearing the same underwear as far as that goes. All right, any questions before we go? All right, good. Listen, we're glad to have y'all here with us tonight and this morning. Yes. Yes.
The underwear stuff.
Yeah.
Can't you kind of relate that to the Roman
Yeah, they had a tunic and then they had the outer garments, you know. You got to realize these people preceded the Roman Empire by 2,500 years. So this is one of the older religions in the world. Before there was even thoughts of a Roman Empire, they had these out, you know. So it's a funny thing. When we get into Mormonism, they have underwear. And Joseph Smith, he mixed a little bit of everything. It's almost like he said, I like that, I like that. And he threw it in the pot, shook it around, then he poured it out, and it was Mormonism. So it looks like Christianity, but it's got a lot of these other peculiar things. And I don't know what he hung up on the underwear. It's called celestial underwear. And to get your planet with your eternal wife, y'all have to faithfully live together as husband and wife here on earth. And then if you follow the Mormons' teachings and go through the rituals, which they have a lot, you will, when you die, you'll get a planet, and your wife will stay eternally pregnant, and you and her will repopulate that earth, and you will be a god. And the name of the movie I saw is called The God Makers. That's what their agenda is, to become a god, which is a scary thought. And it'll tell you what they think about Jesus in there too. And so, yeah, we'll get to that later. I'm trying to whet your appetites for that. We'll have fun with that one. But these religions are, most of the world believes this. So, all right, let's close in prayer then. Lord, we thank you for this day and for the blessings of this day. We thank you that we could be in church and worship and study your word. We thank you for loving us and providing for us, protecting us. And Lord, we pray for our nation tonight that, Lord, you begin to heal the hearts of those who have turned away from you and bring them back to you. Lord, only you can do that more than anything else in the universe, is you through your Spirit. But help us as your children to live lives so that they can see you and us. And may we be a part of that peacemaking and be instruments of your love here in a world that seems to grow darker each day. Now, Father, bless this, your church. And we just ask that you be with those on our prayer list, watch over them. And we give you thanks until we meet again in Jesus' name. Amen.